All right. Well, welcome everybody to our session on introducing the new comprehensive literacy guides, the updated version of them. So my name is Bev Smith, and I am a designer of professional learning out of the South Office for APLC. And I was a classroom teacher for 25 years before moving into the role of literacy lead for both Palliser School Division and then moving on to Lethbridge School Division, where I was the literacy and the EAL lead for that school division. Irene, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. This is Irene Heffel, and I am a designer of professional learning for APLC out of Edmonton. And I've retired from Edmonton Public Schools, and now I consult in literacy leadership throughout the province.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Gibbs. I am a reading specialist and designer of professional learning with the Edmonton office of APLC. And I have been with APLC as a designer of professional learning for 5 years now, and also worked with Edmonton Public as a reading consultant and classroom teacher of students with special needs for many years. So I'm happy to be here.
This morning, our plan, this is an outline for our time together. We're going to talk about what is comprehensive literacy, what are the updated comprehensive literacy guides and how you could use them, what you'll find in each guide, and a little bit about each of the topics. So our topics are oral language, phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, read aloud, shared reading, small group reading instruction, independent reading, and writing. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. So welcome again we have a few people joining us. So to begin with, we're going to talk a bit about what do we mean by comprehensive literacy, and sort of why are our guides called comprehensive literacy guides. So you can go to the next slide, Kelly. Comprehensive literacy instruction is, this is how it was defined by Pinnell and her colleagues. It is the equitable instruction that addresses all dimensions of reading and writing, including phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and the strengths of students' cultural and linguistic context. So it takes into consideration the whole child, and it is comprehensive of everything that we need to be doing during our instruction. The only thing missing in this definition is writing, but it's important to know that writing is critically important and it needs to be a part of all literacy programs. Comprehensive literacy to me also extends beyond just the literacy time. It is for the whole day. We are applying our literacy strategies and we can use these guides in many different contexts that subject areas throughout the day. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Irene.
So the comprehensive literacy guides, of which there are 10, were designed to offer routines and tools to support teacher work in the classroom, literacy instruction. Each guide provides a foundational understanding of the concept of the key components of elementary literacy instruction, and each guide is like a snapshot. It provides a solid starting point. It can be used for reflection, review, any kind of pieces that you want. If you're looking at your program and you're wondering if you've hit all the places you have to, then this is where you can go. Everything in these guides is connected to the program of studies, which is another good element of this. So again, if you're reviewing your work and saying, what have I missed or what do I need more of, these guides will provide that information for you. So I'll just show you the oral language literacy guide and just briefly take you through what what is in there. Not every guide is exactly the same as the other. However, there are common titles, common elements that go into each one. So I'll just show you. Here's the cover, and it's important. This is oral language. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see the components, but you'll see oral language in in a different color. So that's where you will find out the guide that you're looking for. So that's an important piece. Of course, we have an overview of what oral language is, definitely curriculum correlations from the program of studies. If we go back up to the considerations, this provides us with instruction. What do we need to consider in planning to infuse oral language into our literacy work? And so these are some of the suggestions that you would want to have a look at in terms of that. Consideration for best practice, again, a deeper look at what goes on in how does your classroom look? Is it amenable to oral language instruction? How do I infuse it into all of the work that I do in an elementary classroom? There are some links that you can go to that provide further information, and it's just a very good, deeper kind of place to go. We do have designers of professional learning tips. So the three of us are designers of professional learning with our consortium. And what we've done is to just add some tips for the kind of thing you want to do in your classroom on a daily basis. So these are some of our thoughts in terms of best practice. And then we move into strategies that target listening and speaking skills. And again, we've got some links and that kind of thing that you can use. And oral language is a bigger separate piece, not separate, but part of all the key components. So it's really worth having a look at that. So we do provide strategies that you can look at and use, and some links. And then we move on to assessment. So with assessment, of course, formative and summative, authentic performance assessments from the AAC, from Alberta Assessment Consortium. We can't forget that. And how do we plan with assessment in mind as we do this work, not one and then the other? Some links and an area that provides modification, support, and technology too. If you go to the right-hand side, you'll see it in action. So here's something around modeling it and having a look at it and seeing this is how it works and this is how it looks. And then, of course, we've provided many resources that would lead you into enhancing the work that you do with oral language instruction. So these are the components, for the most part, in each of the guides. So those are the big sort of titles that you'll find. And of course, with every guide is a different key component. We'll have some different information in it.
Okay. Thank you, Irene. I look forward to everybody sharing their guides. There's a lot of great information for everyone. One of the things that we talk about in most of the guides and instruction in general is that release of responsibility back to students. And one of the things that Anita Archer did way back is she put together the idea of doing that through an I do, we do, you do release of responsibility. So it's probably very familiar to most people. So here we talk about I do the teacher models. We do, it's either initially the teacher does the I do more than once. We do together. We do as guided practice, and then you do, meaning the student is doing that independent practice. We need to go back and do that I do, we do more than once, and that's fine. So that is something that you will see as a theme running throughout them all. The other thing that we're talking about in terms of literacy is where literacy, how it's broken down. And one of the nicest ways of seeing how literacy works is through Scarborough's Reading Route. Hollis Scarborough put together the Reading Route back in 2001, and we have two different ropes, if you like, and each part of each rope has individual strands. And one of the things that we know is that when there is a strand that is frayed, just like in wiring in a house, if one strand has gone wrong, it can affect all the other strands. So in terms of language comprehension, we look at how students come to school, come to their daily work with their background knowledge, and what is their vocabulary? How do we support the vocabulary of the students? And this is especially true in all of these areas when we talk about our English language learners and what they bring to us and how we can support them. Language structure, we look at the semantics, the structure of sentences, oral sentences. And so a lot of these go back and connect to different areas of the curriculum. The verbal reasoning, what makes sense, if we think back to the day of Amelia Bedelia, and if Amelia Bedelia was going to draw the drapes, I think it's closing the drapes. Amelia Bedelia just got out a sketch pad and drew the drapes, but she didn't have that verbal reasoning, that inferencing to do that. Literacy knowledge, looking at the different genres and literature and just understanding how we get our experiential knowledge from that. One of the most important areas of literacy we look at is in terms of word recognition. Phonological awareness, that ability to listen and to manipulate sounds is hugely important. That affects, of course, the decoding, the alphabetic principle, spelling, sound, symbol correspondences, and then, of course, sight recognition. And we have to be careful that we don't talk about sight recognition as a memorization of sight word lists, but as a memorization, learning, understanding of patterns, sound symbol patterns, to create sight recognition. But the whole idea behind word recognition is for reading to become automatic, and that built-in automaticity and the strategic learning of language comprehension, all those strands weave together to create a skilled reader. The individual guides. Irene.
Oral language goes, if you can notice that it goes K to 4, but it certainly would be something that goes beyond into every grade. And just some key points about it in terms of critical pieces I wanted to share are that it enables effective communication through spoken words. It's used as a means to share information, ask questions, or express feelings. So daily interactions are critical. It's really important to promote purposeful conversations. So these pieces are like focused conversation, accountable talking. These require a protocol, for instance, turn and talk, that kind of piece. But that's what is meant by purposeful conversations. So we teach students how to have a conversation with each other. A language-rich environment is full of words, conversations, reading and writing activities that allow our students to naturally learn and absorb language. And so teaching kids about storytelling, giving them narrative skills, focused questioning strategies, which really implies that the teacher needs to have a bank of questions that go beyond very literal questioning, and passing that on to students using thought-provoking prompts. Those are all part of the rich environment of talk. And as I said, it's a separate, like a key component of all of the components in the program of studies. And it behooves us to relook at how we are looking at oral language in our program, and where is it, and how can we infuse it, perhaps in a way that we've never done before, keep what we're doing, add something, but we really need to give oral language a serious thought about where is it in my work. Independent reading is another component of literacy instruction. Independent reading includes students' choice, time for reflection and discussion, and access to a wide range of texts. Students need to be able to know what they like to read, find it, and realize they can read that text. Part of this is to foster a love of reading, because that is also our responsibility, is to show and open up the whole notion of reading being a wonderful thing. While we do that, we're helping to improve literacy skills for our students, and we're promoting student ownership of the reading process. Choices for reading space, resources, quiet and focused, having authentic conversations. And, the teacher is the model. It's so important that you model everything that you want your students to do. And that's one of the pieces that you can be modeling the book you like to read. You can talk about it. And I recommend once a week to have a talking day where students can have a thought-provoking question and talk about what they're reading with each other in a reading buddy situation. So that's an important piece to add to this, is that talking about what you are reading to each other is a regular part of that independent reading routine, because doing all of that also helps to build background knowledge for our students. Every time you read something, you're adding to your background knowledge toolkit.
You're muted, Kelly.
And here I was trying to be so efficient. So I had the opportunity to work with the phonological awareness and the phonics comprehensive literacy guides. As you'll notice here, we talk about phonological awareness directly in the curriculum, and note that it is an intentional implementation. It's not something that we just sort of do when it comes up. So foundational literacy as the organizing idea is supported by the ability to identify and manipulate sounds in oral language. This is the link. And the link, just so everyone understands, goes to all of the guides. Right now, the links to individual ones doesn't appear to be. Anyways, it's just there. So the phonological awareness guide, not that I'm going to go through every single piece of it, but I want to just highlight in here the importance of phonological awareness as not just a kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2 way of looking at language, because it builds and builds and moves into the area of phonics and then conventions as well, because that's where spelling is covered. But I want to just share here the overview, the difference between the phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, and understanding the phonemic awareness is part of that umbrella, and it's a huge piece. There will also be in here the learning outcomes that are identified for K-2, but always remembering that all of the things that we do for decoding, for encoding and spelling, this is where it comes from. And so when you have students that are struggling, this is where we need to go back to. There is a look at some different resources, of course. This is in particular looking at a sound wall. This one comes from the UFly Foundations, but there are others out there and other materials to use. So as Irene had mentioned in the other types of work that we did in the literacy guides, there isn't a similar pattern that we've used. And in this case, I wanted to be really specific about how phonological awareness is developing and where you can look at back at the curriculum where students may need extra support beyond grade 2. So we can't just need phonological awareness. So always keep this one in your back pocket, even if you're a grade 6, junior high, even a high school teacher. So all of that information is in there for you. I wanted to just ensure that as we look at the whole idea of phonological awareness in the curriculum, that is your basis of your sound symbol learning. It has the piece of the ability to manipulate sounds in spoken language and throughout the curriculum that we know for K-2 and beyond. It starts with experimentation, manipulation of sounds, and then finally it is the application. That in itself has us look at a systematic look at instruction. That is a process, a procedure. It's a guide for you to follow. And I have some people say, well, what about kids who don't need the phonological awareness? There's always a place for it in building metacognitive learning. And what you'll find in here is that ability for students to take what they learn and to apply it in other ways. So the whole process is doing phonemic awareness, the visual work, the auditory work, the blending work, introduce new concepts, add in word work with what new sounds you've taught, identify those irregular words. So it's become much more meaningful for us to help students to identify sight words that are only sight words because they have sounds in it that are temporarily irregular. And as they become known to students as we teach those sounds, then they are no longer irregular. They become part of the automaticity of learning. And all of this has to be applied to decodable text. There is a place definitely for leveled books, but in the process of teaching the sound symbol decoding, we need to use decodable text and then move with leveled text with comprehension, perhaps. So then that moves us into, well, okay, now we have the sound symbol, we hear, we play, we do, and now we look at the phonics. And so this is our next guide of comprehensive literacy, the phonics piece, and it looks at, again, intentional implementation. The organizing idea for K-3 and beyond is that ideas and information can be articulated accurately and imaginatively through the use of writing processes and an understanding of the author's craft. So that takes place over time. Oops. I feel like I want to change that, but I'll come back to that. So in the K-3 curriculum, and I'm not going to show you the guide again, but basically we look in the curriculum about understanding the relationships between oral sounds and symbols and the ability to accurately recognize words through phonemic awareness, sound symbol connections, and word patterns. And again, building that automaticity. So it comes back through all of the guides that we talk about, the I do, we do, you do, there's review, the phonological awareness warm up, and then you set the goals, set new concepts. It's teacher led, then it can become student led. It's that release of responsibility. Teaching those patterns through the goals and the concepts, then using connected text. And the dictation is, of course, the writing piece, the connected text, pulling it back into that, the reading piece. It's not just about writing, it's about reading, and then the writing connection to the text. It's important to understand that I think the phonemic and the phonics, we never want to leave writing out. It's always part of it. But in the phonological piece, when we look at sounds, and one of the things we have to do in the phonological, as we do in the phonics, is we start off with words, and then we change a sound, we change the initial sound, the ending sound, the medial sound. So here is the word cat, and changing the k to a b, and now we have bat. But we do that orally, but then in phonics, we do it in writing and being able to make those connections. Okay. Vocabulary.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. So we're going to talk now about the vocabulary guide. So the vocabulary, in the vocabulary guide, you'll find the curriculum correlations to the vocabulary organizing idea. You're also going to find some information on the role of background knowledge, because that is really critical to the development of vocabulary. How do we pick words to teach? That's a big challenge. When we know that students need to learn thousands of words every year, our teaching time is finite. So which ones are going to be the most important for us to choose to teach? There is the key instructional components from Cobb and Blatchewitz's work from 2014. It's a great little book called No More Look Up the List Vocabulary. So it's a excellent little book. It's quick and easy to read. There are strategies for active word learning, because we know that here is a list of vocabulary words, go look them up in the dictionary, is not an effective way to teach vocabulary. Generally, students will go to the dictionary, if they know how to use it, find the word. And then once they find the word within those definitions, there's often other words they don't know. So now they have to go chase down other words. So we want to use active word learning strategies where we are engaging students in hands-on learning of words, or as hands-on as learning words can be. Also, morphology is included within the vocabulary organizing idea. And the APLC, if you go onto our website and just search curriculum resources and search morphology, there is a wealth of resources in there. So the next, with vocabulary, what we're talking about, you can go to the next slide, Kelly. Vocabulary is what we would consider an unconstrained skill. And that means that there is no end point. We continue to learn words throughout our whole life. I was just reading The House of Doors, and it had a lot of words in it. The author used a lot of words I had never heard of before. And so I was having to check their meaning, and I was using my context clues and different strategies to figure out what those words meant. So a constrained skill would be something like knowing the names of all the letters, right? That is a constrained skill because there are only 26 letters, and if we put in the upper and lowercase, then we would have 52 symbols we would need to learn. But once you know the names of those letters, that's it. You know the names of the letters. An unconstrained skill is one that lasts a lifetime and can go on forever. Okay. It's also very reflective of our background knowledge and our exposure to words. When I think of second language learners, if they don't have the background of going to a zoo, or even our own students, if they've never been to a zoo, the knowledge that they're going to need for those words like zookeeper, feeding times, all of those things might be new to them. So we have to, it depends on what we've already known about that topic. Okay? It also includes our understanding of morphemes. So if we were talking, my husband and I the other day about polymers and polynomial, and I'm like, well, if you know what like poly means, then that helps you to understand so many other words, right? If I know that poly means many, a polygon would mean many sides. So all of those things would help us to understand lots of other words. And vocabulary is one of the biggest impacts in all curriculum areas. So when definitely this guide, all of the guides could be used in all subject areas, but vocabulary is key to understanding all of those content areas. One of my favorite strategies within the guide is Marzano's 6-step process for teaching new terms. So that in that, for our initial word learning, we would look at the first 3 steps. And the step 1 is we would provide a description, explanation, or an example of the new term, including for many students a non-linguistic representation of the term. So a picture or a short video, something that will be more visual for some of our learners. They really need that. The next thing we would do is ask the students to restate the description, the explanation, or example in their own words. And then we ask them to construct a picture, a symbol, or a graphic to represent the word, the term, or the phrase. So over the course of time, then we want to work on deepening that word understanding. So periodically, when we want to engage them in activities that help them add to their knowledge of those terms. We also want to periodically ask students to discuss the terms with one another, and we want to allow opportunities for games with their vocabulary words, allowing them to play with those terms. The next guide I'm going to talk about is our fluency guide. So fluency, again, you'll find the correlations to the fluency organizing idea. You're also going to find information about accuracy, rate, and prosody. You'll find strategies, including choral reading, repeated reading, and the wide fluency-oriented instruction is developed by Kuhn. You're also going to learn about strategies for assessment, and included within the guide, there is a link to the Virginia Literacy Partners checklist for prosody, because prosody can be kind of a challenge for us to assess. So it's a really good checklist that you can use within your classroom when you're listening to students give a presentation or just interacting with others in conversations. Another good tool that many schools have within them is the Fountas and Pinnell, and you don't have to use the full Fountas and Pinnell for this, but they do have a good rubric for fluency, and in it they talk about pausing, phrasing, stress, intonation, rate, and integration. So pausing is the way that the students are using punctuation as reading or giving a presentation. Phrasing is the way that they put those words together in groups to represent meaningful units. Stress is that emphasis on particular words to reflect meaning. As we would in oral language, like where we're putting that emphasis as we talk to people. Intonation is our varying of our voice in tone and in pitch and in volume to convey meaning. Lots of people might call it expression when they use expression. The rate is, are they reading at an appropriate rate? They may have a few slowdowns to define the words, and then integration is, are they using all of those things together? So I'm going to talk just a moment. You can go ahead 2 slides, Kelly. About accuracy. So when we're talking about accuracy in fluency, we're talking, one more. Oh, did I take, I thought there was another one in there. So accuracy would be that, that are, how accurate are we, like when they're reading words aloud. Our rate again is the proper rate, and then our prosody is using the intonation and all those pieces. We also want to think about fluency as not just for reading but for writing. So can students maintain a good fluid rate of writing? And if they can't, maybe that means they need more work on phonics. So then we want to go back and look at those phonics skills. Maybe it means they need to develop a bigger bank of sight words. So those pieces. You can do an informal assessment just having kids read aloud to you, and then just the lines on this informal assessment are just where the kids read, and I put in the punctuation when they missed punctuation, and noticing where they paused. So you can see the lines are just showing where the breaks are, where they took their breath, so how they were phrasing. All right, I'll turn it over to Irene for read aloud.
Read aloud, another key component of, comprehensive literacy instruction, is as critical as anything else that we've talked about. It's really, really important to use mentor texts appropriately and start to create a habit of mind around the mentor text in your work. It's a lot of this is about teacher as model. So when you, as I said earlier, when you model, you're showing your students what you want them to do. You're sharing out loud your thinking. And so a mentor text read by you in terms of sharing your thinking as you go through it and doing it all on your own as students watch and listen would be the first part. Second part of that would be, now we will reread, and I will involve my students with it. And I can't say enough about mentor text and how critical that is for the work you do. And you don't need an entire book to teach a strategy. You might want to read a part of a book that has some really good dialogue in it. And you take your kids through that, and you talk about it and you show them. You might want to choose a mentor text that is very descriptive in nature, and that's what you are teaching them. A mentor text is a very good part of a mini lesson in which you are showing students. It's still that I do it, we do it, you do it component. We need to balance the joy of reading and the reading for comprehension component. It's very important to read a story to students every day, to read something, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, without anything except read and listen and enjoy what I am reading to you. And so there's that joy of reading. There's silent reading. There's independent reading. There's that whole component of that, providing that joy. And there's the teacher reading a chapter book, or something that's very interesting for students at the end of the day or at the beginning, whatever. But it's an important component. Read alouds on your part should engage the audience, encourage discussion, and you've got to make sure that you're connecting the text by modeling your own connections and then showing students how they can connect to their lives. You obviously are varying your pace and tone, as Bev has just said, for reading, and you check for understanding. And so we're kind of looking a little bit at the before, during, and after component when you are reading aloud, and that would be activating background knowledge. Now you're stopping to check for understanding, and then you're reflecting. You could extend the learning where it's appropriate. But all of this goes back to the notion of having a mentor text where you show students how you activate your background knowledge around a topic. You stop and check for understanding, and then you reflect. And again, that's that modeling. And now I want my students to work with me with good questioning around a piece of text or the same text. So those are, to me, the really important components of good read aloud. And I just think mentor text must be a real habit of mind for us as teachers to say, what text can I use? And again, you might just share a page out of a book to show a skill. You might read the whole story. There's so many ways that you can use mentor texts in Read Aloud. And so that's how we try to blend that in terms of, and it really fits the I watch and listen. Let's do this together. And now I want you to read a story and, reflect, or whatever background knowledge, retell, relate, reflect.
Thanks, Irene. So shared reading. Shared reading is what in the guide you'll find the correlations to both comprehension and fluency. It isn't just limited to those two, but those are the two that I felt were mainly going to be addressed through shared reading. But certainly text forms could be in there. You're working on, even decoding as you're working through reading the text fluently. You're also going to find information on why we would do shared reading in our classrooms, the parts of the shared reading lesson, the before, during, and after reading, the potential focuses that you might have for your shared reading, and also some criteria for effective implementation. What are the teachers doing and what are the students doing? You can go to the next slide. So shared reading isn't delineated in the curriculum, but it works to support the development of comprehension, fluency, and modeling those word-solving skills. And when we think back to that, the Foundations for Literacy slide, the I do, we do, we do, you do, it is the first we do. It's that shared demonstration part where we are working together in a large or a small group, possibly, to read the text together. It is not round robin reading. Everybody is reading out loud together at the same time, or they're at least following along with you. We are not calling on students to read out loud. That is really a stressful practice for students, so we don't want to be doing that, okay? It extends the instruction in the reading process. So I can take what I was modeling, what we were working on in our read aloud, and we can now try that in our shared text together. And it is not just for little kids. We stop doing shared reading way too soon. We could use this as part of our social studies or science. Maybe there's a part of a social studies textbook you expect students to read. Often those textbooks are written at a level that's a little higher reading comprehension or reading ability than the students can do. So if we can do that as a shared reading together, it's going to help them, okay? And they can all have their eyes on that text. Use grade level text. So even if you have some students who are below level, they are getting that support through the group, through you and the group. So it's still appropriate to use that grade level text. And in fact, research is showing that it is helpful for students to have some experience with more difficult level text. One of the great resources that I have found is Shake Up Shared Reading by Maria Walter. You'll see the image on the next slide. And in it, she uses picture books a lot. And it's for K-6 or K-5. And it's definitely got within it the before reading, the during reading, and the after reading for several texts that you could use. So it's like a pick up and use kind of book. You just have to make sure you have access to those picture books. You can use things like a document camera to project them. Sometimes you can find the text online. You might find it in a YouTube video. There's lots of ways to access those texts, and think of it even like using News ELA, something like that, where you can project the text on a whiteboard, or big books with younger grades are fabulous. Okay, if you've got access to big books, if you have articles that your whole class can have access to, anything like that. The important thing is that everybody can have their eyes on the text. So we use that before reading again to activate prior knowledge and set a purpose. During our reading, the teacher is setting the pace for the reading. So make sure that you slow down so that all of the students can read along with you. You want to be that model for phrasing and fluency, and pause where needed to highlight strategy use. So if there's a challenging word, how can you pause and show students how you work your way through that, or work your way through it together as a group? Afterwards, we want to engage in a discussion using those open-ended questions that Irene was talking about earlier. We want to move beyond those literal questions. And we want to make sure it's a conversation and not what we would call an interrogation, where it's like the teacher just drilling questions, but we want to engage in a conversation. The next guide that you'll find is for small group reading instruction. And again, I felt that the curriculum correlations most applicable were comprehension and fluency, but certainly phonics could be in here, phonemic awareness, possibly if you're working with some alphabet books. There's lots of different possibilities here that for curriculum correlations. You're going to find information on 3 different forms of small group instruction: strategy or skill groups, guided reading groups, and book clubs. We want to make sure that we are using assessment to inform small group instruction. And Jan Richardson has a model for that called Assess, Decide, and Guide. And you'll find an overview of that within the guide. We want to find there are also the steps for implementing all 3 forms of small group instruction. And there are small group planning guides, which we'll show you in just a few moments. So small group reading instruction is that we do, or it's like that second form. It's the more guided practice where we're working with smaller groups. You can go to the next slide, Kelly. Again, not delineated in the curriculum, but it works to support the development of comprehension, fluency, and the application of those word-solving skills that you're working on in phonics. It is also usually assessment-based, depending upon, well, it's always assessment-based, but the kinds of assessment that you're basing it on is going to depend on the kind of group that you're using. So the kinds of small groups, that's on the next slide, are strategy groups. Now, in strategy groups, we're using our assessment information to find something. Maybe it's a skill, a phonics skill that many students need. So we can be using decodable texts and practicing that skill. We can find that pattern within the text. So a strategy group is based on either a phonic need or a comprehension need. Maybe I'm finding that I have a group of students that are really struggling to visualize as they read. I can pull them together, and they're going to bring their own books that they're reading. They don't have all the same books unless you're doing it with a decodable text or something like that, like something that's very phonics based. But if it's more comprehension based, kids bring their own books. You give a brief lesson or reteach of a lesson that you might have done with your whole group, and then they're going to practice it while you coach them in that small group. Guided reading is that typical guided reading we think of with leveled text. We wouldn't begin it until after the students are pretty solid in their foundational skills. So you want to wait till they're probably, towards the end of grade 1-ish reading level before you would want to start working in your guided reading groups. And we also have book clubs where we have different leveled texts where we have small numbers of copies, probably between 4 to 6 copies of the same text, and kids are going to work together to read through a book together. Now, I've created some planning guides. So Kelly, if you can click on that link. There is a link within the guide that will take you to the planning guides. There's also an independent link for them when you're in the small group reading. So there is a planning guide for guided reading and taking observational notes with students. And then if we scroll down, we'll find a planning guide for strategy groups based on phonics, or using a decodable text. So those phonics skills and phonemic awareness skills that we want to work on. And finally, you will find a planning guide for a strategy group lesson that is beyond just beyond a phonics-based lesson. Okay. All right. And I'm going to turn it over now to Kelly to talk about the writing guide. You're muted, Kelly.
I almost said a bad word, everyone. We're back to the comprehensive literacy guide for writing. And this is our final one, is it not, Bev? Our final guide for today. So what we're looking at in writing is remembering that writing is a process. It involves a process. It always does. Sometimes the process is sit and write. Sometimes it's very scripted. Sometimes it's following a particular plan. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that people were aware of here is that writing always includes the skills that we find under conventions. So conventions ends up looking at sentence structure, grammar, syntax. It also looks at the whole idea of spelling as well. So altogether, that still is part of writing. Here we look at what that writing is, ideas and information that can be articulated accurately and imaginatively through the use of writing processes and an understanding of the author's craft, which I think I accidentally put into one of the other guide descriptions. So I'll make sure I edit that for you all. So the writing process, of course, is very familiar to people. How you go about doing that, of course, is entirely up to you. If you have different purposes to different parts, you don't have to do start to finish for every writing process. The whole idea in the curriculum is that students start with experimentation. They build their writing skills, they build their writing processes, but there's also research writing skills and processes. It's an ability to share their perspectives and their ideas of the world and what they understand. But the curriculum is meant to also help build creative expression. That is follows into some accuracy in their writing, whether it's in research or just in their ability to write daily, build that artistic expression. And that can be through the use of vocabulary. It and very often is. If we remember Bill Martin in the books that he wrote, many of the stories that he wrote or poems that he wrote included visual graphics, like Pow was large and colorful, and that is the part of artistic expression using vocabulary. Writing is about critical thinking overall. It's not just artistic thinking. It's planning, drafting, revising, editing, publishing, and rewriting all along the way, which is not always a favorite thing for kids to do, but it is the thing that we ask them to do. One of the ways that we can help students is by following a process that Joan Sedita put together called the writing rope. We talked about the reading rope earlier. This is a very similar graphic that looks at how we take all these pieces of the curriculum, and we help students by looking at each part appropriate to their grade level and helping students to build their skills. How do we generate ideas? How do we gather information? These writing processes, organizing, drafting, writing, revising, these all require critical thinking skills. And of course, syntax, that's the mechanics, the conventions, using grammar, syntax, sentence structure, going from simple, compound, complex sentences, and how does punctuation play a part? Text structure, of course, when we go back to curriculum, the text structure is a big piece. And we look at the types of text that are available to kids. And this is where we make a nice connection to the different genre that kids are reading and what they're writing. So always we know there's that big connection between reading and writing. So narrative, informal, opinion structures, then the paragraph itself, and using the different kinds of cause and effect, compare, contrast, all the things that come out of reading also are infused in writing. Then there's writing craft. Let's build in that artistry using word choice, going back to the whole idea of vocabulary and making that exciting. And knowing that every writer has an audience. Even if the audience for the student is only the student themselves, but it is having an awareness of audience, being able to share that writing. We talk about shared reading. Let's talk about shared writing as well, and how that makes an impact. And remember that not every piece of writing needs to be marked, assessed, but every piece of writing is observed either by the individual who wrote it or together as a shared piece. How are we using the literacy devices, literary devices that kids can use? And how are we demonstrating that through shared reading? And it's a very powerful tool. And then of course, transcription is like, let's get it down into paper. And that's where those spelling skills, the phonemic, the phonological, the phonics all come into play. And let's not forget about the idea of handwriting itself, cursive, manuscript, and keyboarding as well. Then what's not listed in Joan Sedita's work, which I think she's been adding to this, is speech to text, text to speech, and so on, as part of the writing process. So definitely another piece that's very important. So as we look at that whole idea of when we looked at the reading rope, the whole idea in the writing rope, let me go back. The reading rope has the simple view of reading, decoding, language comprehension equals reading comprehension. In the simple view of writing, those transcription skills, so that kind of decoding piece, the encoding piece, the composition skills themselves, and we have to teach them in balance, as we have to teach them in balance in the simple view of reading. We do the same in the simple view of writing. So transcription skills, the composition skills that we need to teach, we have to balance them. And it can't be just heavy on one and light on another. They have to be equal. And that's how we get skilled written expression. So very important pieces in the whole idea of the writing skills in the comprehension guides. And just to throw fun into it, for our French immersion, French as second language teachers, it is important that you know that there is other information out there for the writing rope in a French version. And for those who may be interested, there is information out there under phonological awareness and under phonics. There are materials available for those in French immersion and French as second language. So contact and find the information on the APLC website or connect with one of us.